Hey, quick question. What do these jobs have in common? Accountant, carpenter, beautician, electrician, photographer, graphic artist, interior designer, choreographer, writer, chef, seamstress. They all work in the Oklahoma film industry. And there's a place for you to join the action. Learn more about starting your film career in Oklahoma by visiting okfilmmusic.org/getting started.
Hey guys, my name is Stephanie. I'm lead animator at Boiling Point Media. We are an advertising agency and a film production studio here in Oklahoma City. I've been with them for 4 years. I've worked on 7 feature films with them. I've also worked for 2 game studios as an animator, and I've also done concept art, character creation, asset creation, and lots of other things too. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about animation. I love being an animator. I've wanted to do it ever since I saw the film How to Train Your Dragon. I watched that movie and I said, that's what I want to do when I grow up. What I love about it is that you get to tell a story through a character's actions and emotions. You're kind of in a unique position of being privy to that. The artist, as the animator, get to convey that to your audience just through their actions and their emotions. It's kind of like getting to be an actor in a way in the movie from behind the camera. And you get to make a lot of really fun, creative decisions depending on the character that you're working with. There's a lot of interesting challenges that come with being an animator. You know, it's your job to have to actors that are reacting to him. So you're kind of working backwards in a way. So you have to really pay attention to things like actors' eye lines, where they're looking, how fast they're looking there. Are they making any specific gestures or speaking in any specific way? Of things like voice actors. So Rufus is a talking character. So you have voice clips that you'll bring into your scene, and you have to, it's your job to take the inflection and the emotion that on the screen through his emotions and his actions. Before we jump into the program, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the 12 principles of animation. This particular graphic that I found has been sort of consolidated into 10, but the original is 12. And these were introduced in the book The Illusion of Life by Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, who were Disney animators. And they've kind of become the staple of good animation and sort of the rules that any animator should keep in mind when they're doing their own character animation. It can really be applied to any kind of animation, 2D or 3D. And if an animation looks stiff or unrealistic, there's a good chance it's not following these rules. So just really quickly, I want to go through each one of them and kind of talk about them. Timing and spacing, which is the amount of frames that it takes for a character's action. So if you have more frames or more time, the action is going to look slower. If you have fewer frames, less time, the action is going to look faster. So a character's weight, its personality, kind of the mood it's in at the time, will often drive the speed of that character's motions and the spacing between those motions. Ease in and ease out, which is sometimes called slow in and slow out, says that a character needs time to accelerate into motion. So a character who is running, for instance, is not going to maintain a constant speed for the entire time. It needs time to sort of ease into that run, and then it will need time to slow down to a stop. Kind of just follows the rules of physics and the rules of momentum. Weight. So a character's weight, how heavy it is going to factor into its speed and the movement of its body. So for example, a big heavy T-Rex is going to be slower. It's going to have more labored movements compared to a smaller and a lighter raptor, for instance. And that can also play into their personality as well. Anticipation prepares an audience for a character's actions. So a character that's jumping, for instance, is not just going to go straight into the air. He might bend his knees, he might crouch down to sort of gain that momentum that he needs to jump. This can be really useful storytelling-wise. It can sort of just prepare an audience for what a character might be thinking of doing next. Arcs. Most objects and characters tend to follow an arched trajectory rather than move in a straight line. This is particularly true for humans and animals and any sort of organic or natural thing. A bouncing ball is going to bounce in an arc rather than a straight line, which will make it look sort of stiff and unnatural. Now, an exception to this rule would probably be something like a robot or a mechanical device of some kind, which tends to move in a straight line. It might also not follow the earlier principle of ease in and ease out. A robot is probably going to move sort of at a constant rate without a lot of change in momentum, and that's sort of what would help differentiate something like a robot from a more natural character like a human or a creature. Squash and stretch. This is probably one of the more important principles. This gives your character the appearance of having weight and flexibility. So a bouncing ball is kind of a classic example of squash and stretch. It might squash horizontally as it hits the ground and then sort of stretch as it goes back up in the air. And you can exaggerate this for a more cartoony effect. Usually the more something squashes and stretches, kind of the more stylized or cartoony it's going to look. This is also a good principle for if you want to convey your character's emotions. So, for example, an angry character might have sort of a squashed, compressed, mad kind of face, whereas a surprised character or a happy character would have an elongated, sort of stretched face with big wide eyes and a dropped jaw. If you're doing a cartoon, you're going to exaggerate it a lot more. If you're going for a more realistic creature or effect, you might dial it back. So follow through and overlapping action. This is going to give your characters the sense that they follow the laws of physics. So there's a couple in here. Follow through determines the outlying parts of a character's body will keep moving after the character's main body has stopped. So what that means, if you have a horse that's running and it comes to a stop, that horse's tail might swish to a stop after the horse's main body has already stopped. So it's sort of the law that states an outlying body part that's further from the creature's core will take longer to come to a stop. And overlapping action says that body parts of a character tend to move at different rates. So if you have a character whose head and torso and arms and legs are all moving at exactly the same time, at exactly the same speed, that's probably going to look sort of lifeless and a bit stiff and unnatural, whereas a character whose head and arms move at different rates at different times would be sort of more what you expect from a realistic thing. Exaggeration, this is the name kind of suggests itself. This pushes a character's motions or expressions beyond what might be considered a normal action. This is really good in animation because even at a realistic animation that might be going for real life, it can kind of look a bit dull if it's not exaggerated a little bit. And that's just sort of the nature of animation. Cartoons are going to push this principle a lot more. So kind of what I talked about earlier with squash and stretch, if you have an angry character and you really want to push that angry emotion for either comedic effect or whatever, you might really compress his face down and exaggerate that expression. Secondary action, this is an action that accompanies the character's main action. So, for example, a cat that is walking through the yard might be twitching its ear or swishing its tail. That kind of keeps characters a little bit more interesting to watch on screen. It sort of keeps them from looking too lifeless. It can be also really good for hinting at a character's inner thoughts or what that character might be thinking. So if you have a character on screen who's not talking, but he's feeling impatient, you could show that by maybe him tapping his foot, or if you have a character who's nervous, he might be sort of darting his eyes or wringing his hands or something like that. So it can be really fun as an animator if you have a shot like that where a character is maybe thinking something but not saying it. It's fun to think, okay, how can I show this character and what he's thinking without giving it away outright? Appeal. This is maybe my most important rule. It's arguably one of the more important ones. This just says that your character needs to have personality and charisma for its audience. And I don't just mean he needs to be a good character or a nice character. I think villains should have just as much appeal to the audience as heroes. If you think about Disney villains, they're very iconic. You think of someone like Scar or Ursula. They have appeal to the audience just like the Disney heroes. And that's really just stating that your audience should be able to resonate with your character and understand him through his design, through his movements. When you're finished with a shot, you sit back and look at it and think, wow, that's a really fun, character to watch. What is he doing that makes him engaging for the audience? So these principles are just sort of something to keep in mind, something that any animator should probably just kind of try to learn as well as they can and apply it to any of their animations that they're working on. Real quickly, I'll run you guys through the pipeline that we use at Boiling Point. We'll start with concepting. Sometimes we don't have concepts, but usually we like to start with the concepting phase. So that's sketches, illustrations, environment paintings, just to get an idea for the characters and the settings of the story that we're going to be making. And sometimes we use turnaround drawings to be like an exact reference for creating the 3D character later. The second stage is modeling or sculpting, and we do this usually in a program called ZBrush, and that's where the character's 3D model or the 3D version of the character is actually built. ZBrush is a really powerful sculpting tool that lets the artist work from a blank canvas all the way to the very fine detail of a creature. So things like skin pores, scales for a dinosaur, wrinkles, muscles, things like that. And the modeling process involves a lot of really time-intensive steps that optimize the model for animation later. The next stage is the texturing, which can also happen in ZBrush. There's a lot of other programs that use it too. You can do texturing in programs like Mari or Substance Painter, but this is just what it sounds like. It's giving the character its color, so the color for the skin or the scales. In the case of a character with fur, the color of the texture underneath would drive the color of the hair follicles. After that comes grooming in the case of a character with fur or hair. So this is done in Maya for us, and this is where we generate hairs all over the body, and they are kind of groomed into place. After that is rigging. Now this can happen really at any stage of the process after the model is built and optimized. And rigging is the process of building a set of skeletal joints for the character. So you need that to get it ready for animation. This is what will build the sort of the body underneath that allows it to be driven for motion later. And I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. After that is animation, which is obviously the focus of this talk, but this is the process of moving a character over a series of frames in a shot. After that comes lighting and rendering. So for the lighting process, the artist brings in virtual lights into the animated scene to match the lights of the background shot. And then the scene is rendered with full resolution textures and detail to make it look as realistic as possible. And finally, there's the compositing stage, which is done in something like Nuke or After Effects. We use After Effects at Boiling Point. Compositing is the process of bringing together all of the rendered passes, what we call passes, which is just the different rendered layers. So you would have probably the character on one layer, you would have the shadow that he casts on another layer, any background elements you might have there on their own layer, which just allows us more freedom to work with each thing individually if we want to change things like opacity or color or anything like that. So you bring all that into something like After Effects where they're compiled into one cohesive finished shot. And this is usually the stage where we might also add things like smoke and extra lighting effects, camera shakes, and things like that. This is the shot that I'm going to be showing you guys today. This is from our most recent film, The Adventures of Rufus, the Fantastic Pet. And what's really cool about this character is that Boiling Point created him from start to finish. So Rufus was made entirely in-house, all the way from modeling to the texturing, the grooming, all the way through the animation to the final shot that you see here. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the process of animation and the process of this shot and how it got into the final film. So let's jump in. So this is Autodesk Maya. This is the software that we primarily use for all of our visual effects work. Here is Rufus's character, and if I turn on his controllers here, you can see that it's kind of like a virtual puppet. So you've got his body, his geometry, and then you've got these controllers that control different parts of his body. So you've got one for his head, one for, his eyes if he's looking around. You've got his wrists, his arms down here. So really you can probably tell just by looking, it's a very complex rig, and it's what allows us to really bring him to life. I'll turn these off and show you. So you can see kind of underneath how he's built. He's got what's called a skeleton, or joints, and it works kind of like a human skeleton. So you have joints for his shoulders, his arms, his legs, his tail, and these are attached to these controllers that we use to move him around. So down here you'll see a timeline, and this is 50 frames. There's 24 frames in 1 second. And I'll just kind of walk you through how a shot gets started. So he starts in what's called his T-pose, which is this pose right here. Let's say I take his head controller and start it looking just like this. And I'll set what's called a keyframe. Now, if you see what happened down here, you'll see that a little red line appeared on this frame 1. And that's basically telling Maya, at frame 1, I want his head to be in this position. And if I go all the way over to frame 24, which would be 1 second, and turn his head, just like that, and then set another keyframe, go back to the beginning here, and then hit play. I'll turn off the controller so it's a little easier to see. So you get sort of this creepy deadpan stare, but that sort of gives you the idea of how it works. So you're setting poses at different times throughout the timeline, and Maya is just sort of interpolating between those poses. I'll undo that. Turn his controls back on. So you have lots of ways to work inside of Maya. You can see that he's got a lot of textures on his body. You can turn those on and off. You can kind of see him just his geo like this. I like to work with the textures on. Helps me get a little bit better sense of the character. You've got a lot of extra controllers over here in what's called the channel box over here on the right. Sometimes you'll find some sort of cool hidden features. So like one good example would be his eyes. So if I click on his main eye controller right here, you'll see that it's got a lot of sub controls over on this side. So if I wanted him to blink, I could do it over here. And you'll see that if I move things, it's changing values over here. And so in Maya, it's a 3D software, so you've got basically an X, Y, and Z axis. So this is telling Maya, his head needs to rotate on, in this case, the X axis. So that's kind of how a rig works in general. This is a typical character rig that we might work with. Let's jump over to the shot that I showed you earlier. So I'll turn him off. And we'll just start with this empty plate, what we call a plate or a shot. And this is what is sort of the first step in the process of the shot. You get this shot and you might have the director come in and say, okay, in this scene, he's been hiding in this trunk for 2 years in this big mansion. And the two main kids of the movie have just walked in and discovered him. So he's been caught. So that's sort of the direction for the shot. So if we turn him on, you can see him in there. There he is. He's been stealing food from the house, so he's realizing that the game is up at this point. So it's supposed to be sort of this comical moment. It's the first time you really get a good look at him in the movie, and it's an important shot. So it's actually one of the first shots that I worked on for this film. And it was fun. I got to sort of bring out his character. He's a very heroic little character. He's got a lot of funny sort of moments like this in the movie, so he was a really fun character to work on. Now, if I turn on what's called the wireframe here, you'll see that he's got sort of these like boxes that he's landing on, and we actually have a couple of different views that we can look at here. Let me switch this to the shot view. And then over here you have sort of what's the perspective view, or sort of your working view. And what I like to do is, if I have a scene like this where he's interacting with like the trunk, for instance, I like to build that in the actual environment so that it gives him something to touch, to land on, and it also gives our lighting artists something for him to cast shadows on, like he would if he were actually there in real life. So you can kind of see the way that works. So let me switch back here real quick. He also has fur, which I can show you in here. He's a furry character. So after you get an animated shot, this is the point that you would turn on the fur and start the process of lighting. So I'll show you a little bit about that. You can bring in basically a virtual light. There's one. Just bring it out here. And the idea behind this is that you would match whatever the real lights in the scene were doing. So in the case of this shot here, back it up a little bit. You've got, sort of this moonlit window behind him, and you've got some fill light in the room. You've got a little bit of warm and cool light playing together. So once the shot has been animated and approved, then it goes on to the lighting artists, whose job it is to put those virtual lights in and do what's called rendering him, which is sort of what takes him from that, more low poly animation version to the final finished version that you see here. So that's a little bit about how animation works. And what I think a lot of people who might want to get into this are afraid of is that it might be expensive to get the software, or it might be hard to learn, or any number of things. But I would encourage anyone that wants to do this to just really dive in. There's actually a lot of great free resources online. Maya itself is free to students for years. So if you use it as a student for learning, if you use it for non-commercial work, it is free. So that's kind of the great thing about Autodesk products, is that they offer their software to anyone that wants to learn it, and you don't have to pay a lot of money just to get started. There's also a lot of great free rigs that you can download online. A couple of these sites that I've listed are Animation Mentor and Rusty Animator, and they're great because they divide character rigs sort of by level of difficulty. So if you're just brand new and starting out, they've got really simple rigs that you can kind of get your feet wet with, all the way up to Disney style sort of in-depth character rigs, creatures, things like that. You can also learn a lot on Pluralsight, on YouTube. There are a lot of great classes that you can attend, or you can just do free learning. I would also say one of the best ways to learn animation and get better at it is just to watch movies. Watch your favorite movies, watch animated movies. Just learn what they do, learn what works on the screen, learn how things move. Watch things in real life. I love to animate animals and creatures. That's kind of my favorite thing to do. So I love just, looking up YouTube videos of the way different creatures move. Go to the zoo, go to a park and watch people. Don't be creepy about it, but watch people learn how things move and emote. And the more you can sort of immerse yourself in that, the better you will be at this. One of the biggest challenges and one of the most important skills you can learn as an animator is to be able to sit back at the end of your animation and really study it. How does it compare to an iconic character that you might have seen on screen? If there's something that you don't like about it, what is that? How can you identify it and how can you address it? And I think, studying the principles of animation, studying films, studying TV shows, studying your favorite characters, maybe your favorite animators, and being able to compare your work to that and say, if I don't measure up, how can I improve? How can I improve this work to be where it needs to be? That's a challenge to any animator, and it's something that I'm always trying to learn and improve on and keep in mind as I'm working. Visual effects are hard. It's a hard industry to get into. It's challenging, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really happy that I get to do this for a living. And I think if you just, really apply yourself, study a lot, do it a lot, the more you do it, the better you're going to be. But it's just a really rewarding industry to be in. I hope that you guys have liked this little intro to animation, and I'd encourage you to try out some of this stuff if you are interested in learning more about it. Again, my name is Stephanie, and check us out at boilingpointmedia.com. Thanks a lot.
Hi, welcome back. We are sitting here live with Stephanie Roach, who you just watched CGI animation. What'd you guys think? I hope you guys thought it was great. I certainly learned a lot, that's for sure. So, Stephanie, I know you told us a little bit about your background in the video, but can you kind of expand on that? You're from Oklahoma.
I'm from Oklahoma. I was born in Woodward, Oklahoma, which is up by the Panhandle, and I moved here several years ago. I graduated from Oklahoma Christian University, which is in Edmond, and I got my degree in gaming and animation. And so After that, I stayed here. I stayed in the state. I worked remotely for 2 game studios as an animator, and then I found Boiling Point Media and have been with them for 4 years.
4 years. Okay, so not too terribly long.
Not too long.
Yeah, but definitely lots of experience under your belt, sounds like. So this is such a fascinating area of film for me because I know so little, although I watch all kinds of films that involved some animation, obviously, and probably more animation even than I realize is happening in the background. So first questions first, can you make me look younger? So, no, just kidding. So what's your favorite thing about it? And then what's the most complicated thing about it?
My favorite thing about it is that as an animator, I kind of get to be an actor. I don't necessarily want to be an actor in front of the camera, but I get to be an actor for that character that I'm animating. I get to make his decisions. I get to get inside of his head, and I get to I get to decide what is he thinking and how do I get to show that to my audience in the most fun way possible.
Yeah. It's almost like you're an actor, but you're looking at yourself. You're almost like creating. I noticed at the end of the video you were talking about the moonlight was shining on the fox's head, and so you had to show that. So the level of detail that requires is pretty amazing.
And I think that's something a lot of people don't realize is how many different jobs go into this and how much research and time it really takes to get these movies looking the way that they do.
Yeah. So what's the most complicated thing?
Oh gosh. The most complicated thing, you know, we run into a lot of technical issues. Each movie we make, I feel like we get a little bit better and we learn a little bit more. But Rufus, for example, was our most recent movie, and it was a challenge because Rufus himself has fur, which is a technical challenge all on its own. I think we just really delved into a great big fantastical world that we hadn't tried to do before. So we had dragons, magic, we had a volcanic environment that obviously doesn't exist in Oklahoma. So the biggest challenge for us is just figuring out how we can tackle those technical issues.
Yeah. So is animation expensive? I mean, what do you need? Obviously a computer, but
Right.
beyond that.
The cool thing about animation is that anyone who wants to get started in animation can do it. So yes, you need some level of a good computer depending on the characters that you're animating. But the software that we use is Autodesk Maya, and it's actually free to students
cool.
with a student email.
Okay.
So if they don't use it for commercial work, they have it for years to learn. So it's not necessarily expensive to get started and learn it. Now, obviously, if you move on into making films and games, it can get pricey. But yeah, anyone can start this without needing a lot of money.
So what's your advice to anyone that's wanting to get started?
My advice is just to do it. Do it as much as you can. There's lots of free online resources that you can, YouTube. Just
Yeah.
go to YouTube and start looking up videos for how do I model, how do I texture, how do I light, how do I animate. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And it's not something that you're going to get good at right away. It's something that I think takes years to develop the skill. So I would say to any students that want to learn this is just the earlier you can get started, the better.
Yeah. So pointing something out, we had this conversation earlier, but you are female, and I can't imagine that there are many females that are doing animation. So do you run into, is it mostly male? I mean, it's awesome that you're doing this. You're definitely making a path, especially for women in Oklahoma that have interest in this.
I have run it. It's in my experience, it's been mostly men that I've run into. I work with another girl. Her name's Kim McNeil, and she's an awesome visual effects and lighting artist. She's part of our team at Boiling Point. But yeah, in the gaming industry, I ran into a lot of male coworkers, and the same here. But what's cool, at least in my experience, is that it's never felt like that slowed me down, or I never felt different from them. I always just felt like part of the team.
Great. That's good. That's good to know. Tell me about, you work for Boiling Point now. Tell me about them.
So they are a local studio in Oklahoma City. They're an advertising agency on one side, and then they're also a film production studio on the other side.
Okay.
What's really cool is that when I graduated, I thought, man, I'm going to have to move away and, move to some expensive place like California. But then I found them, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I could stay here in Oklahoma and do this kind of work that I love here in the state.
Yeah. So do you recommend, if there's someone, because we try to gear this to new people wanting to get involved in film and music, and bringing them to, the landscape. So, because there's so many jobs available right now. So we really want to push that through. Can someone contact Boiling Point? Are you guys interning?
Absolutely, yeah. They can go to boilingpointmedia.com, and there's you can look at our About page and kind of see the work that we've done. Shoot us an email. We're always kind of looking for interns, really in any part of the production or the advertising side, but
Awesome.
visual effects too. We have spaces open.
Awesome.
We have a user question.
Awesome.
This is user off camera. The user question is, where do you find your inspiration for getting into the right creative mood?
Where do I find? I watch a lot of movies while I'm working. So, for instance, Rufus had a dragon. I watched a ton of Game of Thrones because I love their dragons and I think they're so cool. So whatever is the creature or character that I'm working on, I'll usually tend to watch something related to that. Rufus had kind of a Harry Potter, Narnia, fantastical vibe, so I usually try to watch things like that. I also love listening to music, so I'm a big fan of like instrumental music, and so I'll listen to that while I'm working to kind of get in the mood.
Well, you certainly can't beat that, right? Watching movies
Right,
and listening to
yeah, it's a
music
great
while
job 'cause
you're
you get to do
working.
that while
It
you're
sounds
working.
pretty much like the perfect scenario. Do you have any more questions?
That's all I'm here for now.
Awesome. Well, it was lovely to have you here. You've
you.
certainly opened up the eyes for animation. It's a whole new world. So you guys heard it here. Feel free to reach out to Stephanie Roach at Boiling Point. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You might say